Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to be making our Christmas feast, so happy Christmas Eve everyone. We have our rib roast that we're going to season up. We're going to be making mac and cheese, sweet potato casserole, Brussels sprouts and bacon, caramelized carrots and onions, mashed potatoes, and green bean casserole. So we've got lots of things to do to kind of prep up here, and an apple crisp. So let's start by making the seasonings for our roasts that we're going to pop into the oven. And they're going to cook for a while because they're pretty big roasts. We're going to start with a good helping of garlic here, and we're going to mince this up. And I'm going to make an olive oil based kind of herby paste that we're going to spread and rub over our two rib roasts. And that will kind of season it up and like kind of cook it in, just make it absolutely lovely. And kind of infuse it with a lot of flavor. So we want to get this garlic nice and small, and that way we can have it all over and really flavor it up. And so I'm cooking up two about 9 to 10 pound rib roasts here. One's 9, one's 10. And so one will actually be for tonight for dinner, and then one was going to be for a really close friend of ours, dinner tomorrow night. So it's kind of going to be pre-baking it, and so it all pre-baking several things for them, so they just have to reheat it tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll do our Yule board, our smorgasbord feast, which is a very different meal than tonight. Okay, we've got our garlic here, pretty minced up. Do a couple more slices over because the smaller I get it, the more flavor that I'm going to get out of it. And you could always use garlic if you want, but I find that this flavor, it's won't burn as easily on the roasting process, and its flavor is a bit more mellow and a little bit nicer. Okay, we've got, this is probably, I was going to say 1/4 of a cup, but I'm thinking this is closer to 1/3 of a cup. But again, it's going to be seasoning up a lot of meat. And then we have some fresh herbs. So I know this says poultry blend, but it actually is a great mix to do for our roasts in here. So we're going to kind of mince it up and season it, but it has rosemary, sage, and thyme. So just wonderful flavors for both chicken and beef. So I'm going to kind of pull off all of these little twiggy twigs. That way we can mince it up and have some nice kind of fresh herb flavor. If you don't have fresh herbs, you can always use dry as well. You'll just use a little bit less in the dry because it's a bit more stronger in the flavor. And what I'm trying to do is just get off the leaves as best as possible. A lot of thyme here, so I might not use all of my thyme. And just try to see how I'm leaving like the twigs behind, just get those off so that we have kind of the nice best flavor and no little sticks in it. And you can also buy the individual herbs, but for some reason I could not find individual rosemary anywhere. The only way I could find it was in the poultry blend. So I got it just with some other ones, so that was a win too. And I think I might only need 2. We'll see. They give you a lot in here. Pull off this little twig. And then we are going to dice these up nice and small because each little cut on it will give us some more flavor. Got our sage. So just our flavors in here are going to be thyme, rosemary, and sage. And then, of course, garlic and black pepper and some garlic salt as well. Okay. I'm going to leave, I think we're going to just do 1 1/2 because this is pretty good. With there, just pull off a couple more of these. We're going to mince this up nice and fine, but this is going to be a good amount of herbs that we can coat up our entire roast with. So we're going to go over it and mince it up really fine. And then we'll put it in there with our garlic. We're going to put some good amount of olive oil in there. Now, some people like to use butter when they kind of coat up their roast. I find olive oil works better because I do this kind of quick sear off on my roast in the beginning, which is a higher temperature. And with the butter, you can kind of burn. The milk solids will burn versus the olive oil has a much higher heat temperature. So you're less likely to get burnt little portions on it. So here, our herbs are getting up nice and fine, and every little cut into the herbs is going to infuse more flavor into this. And we have a pretty thick roast, and so we want to make sure that that outside is really covered with it. As you see over here, I actually have, it's like an arch of roasts because it's the best way to fit them in here. So this is our rib roast. We've got a 9 pounder and a 10 pounder of this, and we have the fat up because we want the fat as it cooks to kind of drip down into the meat. They're on a rack so it doesn't sit in a puddle of it and kind of roasts up evenly all the way around. Takes a hot minute to cook this. You do essentially 30 minutes on like 450 with a quick kind of sear off. That kind of gives you that crispy outside. And then you finish it off at about 350 for 80 to 90 minutes. It's kind of 10 minutes per pound of meat after that. And I like mine on the medium rare side. So we're on there. But we'll check it with a thermometer towards the end to cook through it. Now, with a prime rib roast like this, when you cook through, you're going to still have your prime rib is a more red colored meat in there. So if yours is brown, it is overcooked. Now, you're going to have the edges be brown, but the base of yours should be a nice kind of pinkish red. So here are our garlic and our herbs. We're going to put a good amount of olive oil in here, kind of cover up our herb base here. That way we can make a little paste to rub around our roast. We need a good amount of garlic salt because we are seasoning up 10 pounds of meat. So we're going to put in probably like 2 to 3 tablespoons. And then we want a good amount of black pepper as well. So I'm going to put in about a tablespoon. And then the best way to really do this is just get in here with your hands and mix it up because that's what we're going to be using to coat up our meat. So we're going to head over to our little meat station over here. And you kind of want to start with the underbelly first. So I'm going to lift up and then I'm just going to rub it on that underbelly. Really kind of rub it in there. Don't worry if you have little bits drop below in here. Let's get the underbelly of this. And then we're going to rub the sides. And just essentially we're going to coat this whole thing up with our herby, garlicky, delicious paste. Now, this will roast and it will kind of have a dark color on it. It doesn't mean that it's burnt. It just means it's nice and roasted well. But there's just no way to keep it like a golden brown. It gets a much darker color, but delicious. And that's kind of the fat crisping it up. On here. Now, if you don't have a roaster, you can always do it in like a Dutch oven as well. But the roaster just allows for a more even cook on there because you have kind of, it is all getting air from around instead of the heat from the bottom of it. Okay, let's get the last bit of this. I'm going to rub it in and clean it up. Some people like to trim where I have this is a bone-in one. They like to trim up so your bones stick out. To me, it's always extra work to do it. So I never really trim it up because it doesn't need to be your little picture perfect roast there. It just needs to taste delicious. But if you wanted to, you can trim up right around the bones so they stick out nicely. But not, again, not essential. And there we go. Let me go wash my hand. Let me give a little more smear on this one. There we go. Let's get our hands nice and washed. Okay. Now this thing is going to be heavy because it's like 20 pounds. So we're going to put it up here. I know I don't often use my oven right here, but we're going to place it in our oven right here. So we have our other oven available for other things. So we're going to place it in here, 450 for 30 minutes. And we're going to turn the temperature down to about 350, 325, 350, depending how long, 325 allows you to extend your roasting time a little longer if you need to. Okay, it's in there. I lowered my racks down so it should be positioned kind of where the whole roast is in the exact middle of the oven, including my little meat arch. Okay, whew. Let's get these waters boiling up here. I am going to just give a quick rinse of these herbs off of my cutting board. Okay. And now once our water gets up, we're going to blanch our green beans really quick. And then we can start cooking our noodles in the same water because the blanching won't really do all that much to it.
A lot of people are saying this is what they cook for dinner on Christmas.
So on Christmas, we do our Swedish smorgasbord, which we'll be doing tomorrow. But this is going to be for my friend's Christmas tomorrow. So I'm making a double portion of it for them.
I was saying the reason we do this on Christmas Eve is because of the
Yes. So we do it because in my family growing up, we never really had this type of meal. We had our Swedish smorgasbord, but my husband's family had a meal like this. So we do this meal on Christmas Eve, and then tomorrow we do our Swedish feast. So we kind of our kids get to celebrate both traditions on both sides. So it's kind of a nice little thing, and it's nice to have 2 feasts in a row. Very, very delicious. It's actually, we always talk about how the end of December is just like feasts because we do, our smorgasbord, we do our Christmas Eve dinner, and then a couple days later is my stepdad's birthday, and I always do this homemade pasta ravioli feast for him. And then there's New Year's. I don't make so much of a feast on New Year's Eve, but on New Year's Day, we do like the Southern New Year's feast, which kind of gives you like all the different parts of it are like, collard greens and Papa John's for, good health and wealth and stuff like that. So lots of feasts at this time of year. But it's nice, except when it's like 70 degrees outside, like it is here. Not so much feeling like a Christmas when it's that hot. I mean, our neighbors are outside. Their teenage boys are playing in just shorts. Like it's that hot out here. It's just kind of crazy. But we're going to kind of trim up our sweet potatoes here. We're going to give them a boil. We're going to make a nice kind of sweet potato casserole. And we'll have that going in there. I'm making a small batch for us, but a bigger batch for my friend for it. So normally we don't have a few of these things on there, but they're kind of what they're requested. So I was like, ooh, we'll add them on. We'll change it. I always say I like to add. I love when feasts are like so many different components because I am a person who loves, I'm there for the sides, all the different sides. That's what I want. So that's kind of like a win-win here for us. Let's get these peeled. And I find peeling your sweet potatoes with a knife takes half the time than with a peeler. And it just works really easily. It also allows you to get off the kind of the drier skin on it. So, and then of course we will also have mashed potatoes and gravy because that's what my kids and my husband absolutely love. And I use a little bit of the meat drippings as long as they're not too toasted. I add some in to make our gravy to give it a nice kind of extra flavor to it.
What other sides?
We'll have green bean casserole, caramelized carrots and onions, Brussels sprouts and bacon, and mac and cheese. So lots of sides. And then, of course, we'll bake up a sourdough bread that I have kind of proofing in there for it. So nobody will go hungry tonight, especially since they've been enjoying all of the cookies. I'm halfway through setting up our dessert table. You know, for when you do your smorgasbord, you have like your main one with all the food, and then you always have the dessert table. So I've got our cookies out and some of our candy. Tonight I'll finish it off with all of my little candy that I have kind of hidden away so that the kids don't eat them. Because I put on there like little hippo snacks, which are like little hippo chocolates and all sorts of delicious things. Okay. Let's drop our green beans in here so that they can start to blanch. We only need to kind of cook the green beans for about, since I have so many, it takes a little bit longer than a smaller batch, but 2 to 3 minutes max until they turn a really vibrant green. Grab my scissors here. But just you always get your washed and trimmed ones so you don't have to do all of the work. And you're just gonna put them in the boiling water for a few minutes. That allows to start the cooking process. We are going to be baking our green bean casserole, but you wanna start with a little bit. We don't need all of it. There we go. And we can have those. Perfect. Okay, and we're back on for our TikTokers. We are prepping up our Christmas feast. We've got our roast in the oven. We're gonna cook it off at 450 for we got about 20 minutes left on it. And then it will be about an hour, 2 hours left on the baking part. We've got our green beans right here, what I'm about to take out because they're nice and bright, blanching off for our green bean casserole. So look how they're just beautiful, bright green. That's what you want when you do this. So I'm going to grab one of my trays here. Give it a good shake. And we're going to put some of them. I'm going to just dump them all in here, but I'm going to transfer some to another container as well. These in here. And this is going to make so much deliciousness. Okay. Now this is for sweet potatoes. Green bean casserole.
Yeah, comment that they love the stock pot.
Yes, this stock pot is my favorite, like, specialty piece that that you get out of your set because it's a huge pot. It comes with this mesh basket. It also comes with a steamer basket on top so you can steam and everything. But I love it because it's really easy to take in and out here. I actually have it in my Amazon storefront because so many people have asked me about this pot. And it is just a really great pot. Especially for it, like when I ever have to make really big batches of chicken noodle soup, I make it in that pot. Okay, let's get some of these green beans over here. We'll divide. And perfect. So we've got for our 2 green bean casseroles. So again, your green beans are just blanched right now, which means they are kind of still crunchy and crisp, but it gets to that when we go to bake it, you don't have to bake it so long to cook it all the way through. I'll slide this over here. I'm going to bring this water back up to a boil because once it's up to a boil again, we can add in our pasta and cook it on there. I'm going to salt it because we're going to want to have it for our noodles. So I'm going to add in just a good amount of water here. There we go. And perfect. And then once we have our noodles cooked, then we'll have this jumbo pot out of the way. Let me wash my hands real quick. Got a little bit of salt on there. Let's see, pretty good. Probably about like 15 more minutes on for us. Let's start sauteing off our mushrooms for our mushroom gravy. That is, well, cream of mushroom soup / gravy that we're going to be using for our base of our green bean casserole here. So we're going to saute them in butter because that's going to give this base, to make it taste a lot better. And let me grab a little paper towel because I drizzled a little bit of my water in this pan and I don't want it to sizzle too much. And the thing about my green bean casserole that makes it so delicious is everything is made from scratch. I don't use canned green beans, so it's fresh green beans. I make my own fried onions, crispy fried onions, my cream of mushroom soup. I make it all myself, which I think makes it so delicious. Okay, let's get our butter in here, sauteing it off, let it melt. I'm going to mince up some garlic, throw in there, and then we've got about 1.5 pounds of sliced mushrooms that we'll start to saute in there. And then we'll coat it with some flour, and then we'll add in some kind of chicken bouillon and water and cream. There we go. Get this minced up. The fresh garlic works wonders in this dish, but again, you can use regular like garlic if you need to. And then once we get this kind of going, I'm not going to start frying up my onions until I have my mushroom gravy made in there, just so that it's, you got to think about when you're prepping like a feast like this, you got to remember like, okay, what do we have room for on my stove? Not necessarily like, oh, I could cook this all at the same time. You got to have space for it. You got to think a little bit about it in the stages before so you can get everything done at the same time. And also like, what are things that are really good that you can like heat up at the last minute, but that can sit in a resting stage. Okay. And I will say there's only a few things that I find need to be made right before dinner is served, and that's gravy, mashed potatoes. Those two are one of those ones that really needs to be made right before because they don't hold well.
Are you baking any bread today?
I am going to bake up a sourdough loaf a little bit closer to when our dinner time is. I'll have that baking a little bit before, kind of free up one of my ovens. I'm probably going to bake it in this oven when we get there. It's tricky because I need this one, you know, before you cut your roast, you need to take it out for a little bit so I can kind of pop it in there, but I'll have my ovens at different temperatures. So it's always a fun when you have something like a sourdough or bread that cooks at a completely different temperature than everything else to kind of get it to go. Okay, we got our butter here. I'm going to turn my pan to about a 6. And we'll get our garlic in here starting to kind of toast up and heat. I have a lot of butter in here because I'm using this butter will be to kind of make a roux as well for the base of our cream of mushroom soup that we will be pouring over our green beans. So give this a nice little, just don't have your garlic too high. And then we will make homemade like onion straws, and you mix part of your onion straws into the base of your green bean casserole, and then you sprinkle the rest over the top. Okay, let's see. Got it. Whoop. There we go. Got it. I had it heating up high on the little burner, so I want to get this high on the top burner. And I'm going to give my sweet potatoes a little stir here. It's going to take my sweet potatoes a lot longer to cook up because it's on a small burner than if it's on a big one, but luckily they can handle a longer cooking bath. Okay, we'll give this a good sit for once it's kind of caramelized up. While we're waiting for this and for that to prep up, we can start prepping up our apples that we are going to have for our apple crisp. So I'm going to slide this over here. I wash my hands because I got a little garlic on them. It's always like, got to think about in stages which ones to do. But the apples I can start cooking up on my little Dutch oven to let them kind of get going. So we're making making 2 big apple crisps, essentially enough to feed 16 people. And kind of around my rule of thumb is around an apple per person when you're making a crisp. And if you have little ones, they can use a little bit less. So I've got 5, 9, 13, which kind of works well because we have 8 and then 7, so 15, and little ones, they get about a half an apple. Or if you're like my one daughter who does not like apple crisp, she'll have lots of cookies. Let me grab a paring knife. We'll start getting these up in about 30 seconds or so. Go over here. Give this a toss. Our garlic is starting to caramelize up nicely. We'll throw our mushrooms in. Don't leave your garlic unattended too quickly or too long because they will go from crispy golden brown to burnt. I'm actually going to dump my mushrooms in now because they are looking good. And it smells wonderful. So we've got our mushrooms. I grabbed pre-sliced. Normally I grab whole ones, but for the simplicity of today, pre-sliced is work. Kind of make sure you coat all of your mushrooms up because mushrooms are like little sponges and they're going to soak up that butter. But we want them to get a good, nice saute on them. And then once they're kind of sauteed, we're going to sprinkle some flour over them. And then we will add in like some chicken bouillon, some starchy water from our pasta, and cream to make our kind of gravy base for it. But we've got them coated. Don't sprinkle any salt in yet. Let the mushrooms cook for a good 5-10 minutes. Get a saute on them and then sprinkle salt on them because they will start to, once you put salt on them, they start to release out their juices and you want them to get a good crisp saute up. Let me grab my Dutch oven for this. That way we can cook our apples in this because I always like to, for my crisps and pies, I always pre-cook my apples. It allows them to be softer so you don't have to bake it as long, which otherwise, you have to bake a pie for so long for the apples to get tender that you risk kind of burning your crust or your crumb. And so doing this will allow you to kind of cook the crumb perfectly because you don't have to worry about the apples getting soft and tender. I'm using Granny Smith because Granny Smith are nice tart apple that keep their shape when you are cooking them, which is what you want. And it will allow you to take the right amount of sweetness for it. Turn my pan down over there to about a 5. And it looks like my water has a nice boil here, so we can start dropping in our noodles for it. Now, when I make my macaroni and cheese, I never actually use elbow macaroni. I like to use the corkscrew noodles, or I guess it's called a cavatappi, but a cute little corkscrew. I think they cook up a little bit nicer. Looks a little bit nicer. So we're going to do a whole box, and I think we'll do 2 boxes. That way we have plenty. Let me give these noodles a quick toss before, and we have some salt in there. And then once they're cooked, then we can kind of dump them out, and then we'll make a bechamel sauce where we'll add in some, we'll add in our cheese and then mix it in. So we'll have a really good mac and cheese. I'm going to do 2 types of cheddar for it, and it will be delicious. Okay. Let's kind of get these little bases out. Where spices is going to be really simple on here, but we have our roast in. Let's go actually check it down. We can take a quick peek at it, and then we're gonna bring our temperature down to 350, but it should be searing off beautiful. You can hear that sizzle, but this high temperature gives you a really beautiful crisp crust on it. 30 minutes at 450, then you're going to turn it down to 350. And that way it will continue to cook, but if you leave it at 450 too long, you're going to burn your crust. So you want to bring it down on there. just give our mushrooms a quick little stir here. Beautiful. They're cooking up well.
You have a question? How many people are you feeding?
So this is for, it's actually for 2 families. So it's going to be for our, part of this is for our dinner tonight, and part of it is for my friend's dinner tomorrow night. And it's going to be about 15, 16 people between the 2 of them. So we're making a good amount of food here for it. So plus, got to have leftovers, because how often do you guys have a rib roast? Let's get these in here. And then our apple crisp, we're going to season up with just cinnamon and lemon juice and brown sugar. And I think it just makes it just a really nice one. If you want a more Christmassy seasoning to it, you could add in some cloves, but I like the simple cinnamon. Okay, make sure you peel your skins off of your apples, because they don't get soft. And I just use a paring knife because I can get them fairly quickly. Yes, I lose a little bit of the apple, but not that much. I typically prefer to get really big apples, but I just grabbed a couple bags of Granny Smith this time, which means a little bit more work, but just fine. And this one is an easy dish where you can prep it, and then because we pre-cook the apples in it, you don't have to worry about them going brown, and then you can bake it up the next day so that it's kind of perfectly baked and delicious. And there, you've got that perfect crumb thing. So it's a nice one that it is like a take and bake. So we'll get that going in here. And our sweet potatoes are still kind of cooking, chugging along there. I've got them on my small little burner in the back. We will whip those up into a sweet potato casserole with some candied like pecans and marshmallows on it, and add a little sweetness to it.
You have a question? Do you cook for other families very often?
No, not really, but this is kind of like a really dear friend of mine who lost her partner this year, a month and a half ago. So it's kind of her first Christmas without. And so I like to kind of, just kind of help her out with this, having family in. And so, yeah, I normally don't, but for a couple of my friends, I do. Like last year, I actually cooked both my Christmas Eve and my smorgasbord for my best friend, because she had surgery like 3 days before, and she wasn't able to move or do anything. So I cooked that for her last year. So it just kind of depends on situations and whatnot on there. But it's really easy for me to kind of take my same dinner and multiply it. It doesn't really create that much more work, especially since I'm fairly used to cooking for large crowds, because I am from a large family. And so making more of what I'm making is easier.
Would you ever consider being a private chef?
I don't know if I would like it for that. I mean, I feel like I'm a private chef for my kids. My oldest daughter likes to say that one day when she's really famous, that she's going to hire me to be her private chef. And I'm like, oh, you mean what I'm doing right now? So I don't know. I love cooking, and because it's a passion, but if it was a job, I don't know if I would love it as much. And, and if I had less control over what I like, my menu, I don't know if I would like that as much, because, I kind of, I take my children's suggestions into consideration, especially my husband's suggestion for salmon, like at least once a week, taking that into consideration. But I don't know. Maybe. I guess the conditions would have to be right too. But, cooking for our family is kind of a full service job anyways, because, I have 5 kids and then my husband, and then we also cook for my parents. And so I have my mom's out of the country right now visiting her family, like staying with her mom and her sisters. And so I'll have my stepdad over tonight as well, but kind of a smaller crowd, but 8 is still a good size for a lot of people. Okay, let's check, and we'll take a pause on that. Mushroom overboard. This is going to be for our green bean casserole. This is going to be the base for our kind of cream of mushroom soup, our homemade version of it. Once these mushrooms have a really good saute on it, then they will be ready to kind of cook up. I'm going to check my sweet potatoes, see how they are cooking. I can tell already they're still pretty firm, but they're getting closer. And let's give our noodles a little bit of a stir here for our mac and cheese. So we've got our nice little corkscrew noodles in here. Yep, still firm. Need about 5 or 10 more minutes depending on there. Whenever you're cooking larger batches of things, factor in that it's going to take a little bit longer for the noodles to cook, a little bit longer for everything, because there's more of it. It drops the temperature down on there. So before we get our apples cooking, because I don't want them to turn brown in the process of prepping all of them up, just squeeze a little bit of the lemon juice in here. That way we can have it kind of cooking up, or nice and like coated in there. That will keep it nice and bright and green by the time we have them all cut up. Okay, I don't know how many like a third of the way done with the apples. This is the least favorite part of bulk cooking, is when you have something like a crisp that is more of a tedious one. The other things are more fun because they're like simple. Yes, you've increased the ingredient, but the prep work isn't as much. Anytime you have to hand peel, a lot of extra work, but not as bad. I made apple crisp a couple months ago for like 30 people. That was a lot of apples to prep, but this, not too bad. Okay, again, slice these out. I wish apple peels would like get nice and tender when you cook them, but they don't, so you really have to peel them. Pears, if you ever want to do a good substitute that tastes similar, are pears, and you don't have to peel them because their skin gets pretty tender. So it's, again, a little bit easier to cook up, and they cook a lot faster. Here we go. Get that out. I'm just going through right here and getting the kind of the core out. This is why restaurants have sous chefs, because the main cook doesn't have to do any of the hard work. Just puts everything together. That's what I need. I need some sous chefs here. Sous chefs that will do a good job. My husband occasionally will help me out in the kitchen. And some jobs he does great, like scooping out the insides of potato. Wonderful. Cutting and peeling. I can peel probably 10 apples in the time it takes him to cut and peel one. He's just not as skilled with it. Because if you're not comfortable with your knife skills, you go slower. But practice will get you there. Okay, let's check on our mushrooms here. Let me wash my hands a little bit. There we go. You can see they're starting to wilt down now. I'm going to spread them out, and now we're going to give a little bit of garlic salt over the top of them. Just spread it out so you can kind of coat a nice layer. This is, again, is going to allow them to kind of drip out their extra juices, their mushroom juices, which will make a really great cream of mushroom soup. Don't mix it in, just sprinkle it over the top. And I like to use garlic salt because garlic salt makes everything taste better on here. Okay, let's check our noodles real quick. You know what? I think we're pretty much there. Before I get rid of this, I'm going to turn it off. I want to reserve some of this starchy water for the base of our creamy mushroom soup because it will thicken it up a little bit nicer. So we'll ladle some of it out. And since we're making a good amount, I'm going to ladle probably close to 4 cups, but I might not use it all because I'll also be using cream. Once I ladle it out, I'm also going to add in chicken bouillon to this so that when we pour it in there, it will add a nice kind of flavor to our cream of mushroom base. And you can also use vegetable bouillon as well. Here we go. But it's nice because this water, you got to use it like 3 ways. So you're kind of reusing it. But it's kind of a great way to add those nice flavors to everything. Okay. Let me see for my mac and cheese. This is my mac and cheese pan. And this is my mac and cheese pan for us. I had to go through and I was finding all of my Dutch ovens that were Christmas colored because I have a lot of them and I love the really fun colored ones. So I was like, all the red and greens. We'll shake out all of our excess liquid. Okay.
What desserts are you making for Christmas?
So for tonight, we'll have an apple crisp and lots of cookies and candy that we prepped up. We've got 2 big tins over here full of lots of cookies. We can actually take a quick peek over there if you want in there. We finished kind of baking them up last night. So we have in here peanut butter blossom with hugs, peanut butter M&M cookies, fluffernutters, butter dreams, and snickerdoodles. And then in this tin, we've got our Swedish pepparkaka, which is a Swedish gingerbread cookie, sparkling molasses, and peanut butter blossoms with regular ones. And then I've already got the request from my oldest daughter to bake up another batch of Aunt Aggie's, which luckily I always have in the freezer, so she'll be able to use those to kind of cut and bake those up. And then she goes, and can you make another batch of chocolate chip cookies? And I was like, sure, I can whip those up tonight, no problem. On there.
What the
Fluffernutters are kind of a peanut butter cookie with marshmallow fluff in it. So you get the fluff from the marshmallows and the nutter, fluffernutters. So delicious. So delicious, by the way. So we'll have those. And they're my favorite cookies. That and the pepparkaka for holiday cookies, I absolutely love. Okay, let's see. Give a little bit more. Shake this out. Now we will make a nice bechamel sauce that we will toss into this and shredded cheese and then shredded cheese on top. But we have at least our noodles sitting to the side for this. So we're good here. We can take this guy out because when I make my mashed potatoes, I'm going to use new water for that because I don't want the starchy water from the pasta in there because that will mess up the consistency of your mashed potatoes. Okay. Whew. I feel like I've got a little bit more room over here now. Okay, beautiful. Our mushrooms are getting there. We're almost to this nice kind of saute side to them. You really don't want to skimp on when you are sauteing them because you want them to have all of that mushroom flavor out. So the longer you cook it, the better. We can put this right here and we can get these apples cooking. My butter's right over here. We'll put a little bit of butter in here because we will be adding cornstarch as a kind of thickener for the base of it, which makes it so delicious. But the butter cuts away some of the chalkiness that cornstarch can have. I'm going to do about a tablespoon because we are making, or more than a tablespoon, like 2 to 3 tablespoons because we're making a bigger batch. I typically do a tablespoon for a batch for 4. So kind of tripled it for this. We'll get that cooking. We're going to add in our brown sugar. I've got quite the mountain over here. And since we have several apples, about 15 or so, 13 actually, we're going to add in about, I'm going to say 1.5 cups of brown sugar. If you are going to use a sweeter apple like a Pink Lady or a Gala, you can use less. But with the Granny Smith, you want to use more because they're very tart apples. And if you don't have enough, then your base will be a little too tangy. And we can start squeezing in a little bit more. We're going to add in a splash of vanilla. There we go. I'm going to do about 2 capfuls. And cinnamon. We're going to do about a tablespoon of cinnamon, or 2 teaspoons. So a couple good shakes around. And a little sprinkle of salt. And then we're going to get our sweet potatoes here because they're just about ready. And I can tell they're all floating to the top, so we're pretty close there. So I'm going to turn that residual kind of heat off there. And let's get this. Let me check again. Yep, these feel nice and tender and soft. Perfect. So what I'm going to do, get this going down here. Let me give our apples a little toss, and we'll put the rest of our apples in here. But this kind of gets it going, lets it start to soak out some of its natural juices and start to get them softened. For this, we're going to strain them. And because it is in a metal container, I can actually just whip those sweet potatoes up in my pot. There we go. Give it a little. Perfect. Whew. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our butter in here and let it start to melt into our sweet potatoes. And then when we get closer to whipping up, we'll add in our brown sugar. But let's get our butter going. We've got it in there, a whole little stick of butter. Let me grab a trivet so I can move that to the side just a little bit. Kind of it. And we're not going to whip that until that butter is completely melted down. Okay. I'm going to cut up or slice up a few apples to get them in here, and then we'll work on our mushroom, cream of mushroom soup. So the next step of that is we'll sprinkle a nice bit of flour over the top of it, mix it up until you almost have every mushroom covered in this little paste. And then we'll add in our liquids, and we're going to use our starchy water. We'll add some chicken bouillon to that, and then some cream, of course, to make it that creamy flavor to it. But you don't actually need as much cream as you think, so it's not as rich and heavy as one might think. But let's get some of these up in there so we can get them cooking up as well. You know, at least it takes, when you've got a lot of things to do, this kind of takes away the monotony of just peeling apples. I need my sister-in-law here. I think she'd be excellent at apples. She's our resident potato peeler at Thanksgiving. And she can peel potatoes so fast. And I think it's because she is a true Irish. She was born in Ireland, lived there, met my brother actually in Germany while she was there for grad school, and he was there doing like a postdoc. And, but she can peel potatoes faster than anyone I know. She is the one where we have to peel about 20 to 30 pounds of potatoes for our Thanksgiving dinner. And I always am like dreading it. And I'll like be like, oh, could you peel the potatoes? And I swear I look over and they're all peeled like in an instant. I'm like, I don't even know how you do it this fast. But she can work miracles. Okay. Got this down nice and low. Let's chop up these few, get them going. And then we'll work on our mushroom gravy. That way we can start on our crispy onions so that we can at least be done with our green bean casserole parts. So what we're going to do is I'm just slicing them nice and kind of thin. I don't like my chunks of apples too thick because it takes them a little bit longer to cook up then. The nice thin little pieces, so much flavor. There. And we can get them cooking up in our nice little spiced brown sugar sauce. Add those in here. Got our next round kind of going. Then we just have a few more apples after that. Okay. So coat them up. And the more apples we get in here, the more this is going to turn into like a soupy type base for it. Perfect. Got you back in here. And just keep your temperature kind of lower. Let it cook nice, low and slow. Okay. Let's get this part. Perfect. I'm going to spread all of my mushrooms out. Let me wash my hands to get some of this appleliciousness off of me. And we're going to take, let's slide this out of the way right here. We can move these because I'm done with this. Okay. We've got our starchy water here. We're going to add in our chicken bouillon. You're going to need like a heaping spoonful. Typically, it's about a teaspoon per cup of water, so I have about 4 cups. So it's about 4 teaspoons or a really big heaping teaspoon of chicken bouillon. It's nice and hot, so it will dissolve really quickly, which is great. There we go. Now let's get our flour. And we're going to coat this up. I'm going to turn my heat down nice and low for this. And we're just going to dust it over, and I'm going to do it in stages. I'm not going to completely coat it with all that I on the first round. I like to mix it up, and then we'll coat it around a second round. So about probably like a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons in there right now. Coat it up, and we're going to essentially make this nice little paste on our mushrooms. And we have a good amount of fat in there because remember we cooked the mushrooms up in that butter. We're going to do a little bit more. And it's going to be about 1/4 a cup of flour, maybe a little bit more, to when we get to the right amount. There we go. Should be the perfect amount. Now we're going to coat it up, and it's going to kind of make them all like a nice and pastiness once you get them all the way coated up. And then we'll add in a little bit of our chicken bouillon and starchy water, and then some cream, and we'll kind of add it in half and half. Here we go. So it's starting with about 1 cup. We'll mix it in here, and you can see it's going to thicken up really quickly, which is perfect because, again, we want a good amount of this base to go on our green beans because this is what's going to make that casserole part really pop. Let's add another cup of our chicken bouillon. Don't just pour it all in at one time because then it kind of floods it and it doesn't allow that flour to kind of hydrate into a nice thick gravy. And you could always add in too much liquid, which then it's much harder to fix after that. So go slow on there. Make sure you kind of scrape off the bottom, like deglaze the bottom of your pan to really bring in those great flavors. Here. We'll add again a little bit more. And then before we add the rest of that, I'm going to add in some cream. So I have that base in there because I like to add that in before I add in the rest of my stock so that I can account for that liquid being added into my cream of mushroom base. Okay. So we're going to put in about like 1/3 to 1/2 a cup. We might add a little bit more, but I want to mix it in. And that's going to give you that instant cream of mushroom look to it. We're going to let it thicken just a little bit before we add in the rest of our base.
Can you go over everything that you're making today?
Yes. So right now in our oven roasting, we have our rib roast. We spiced it up or seasoned it and then seared it off, and now it's cooking at 350. We are making apple crisp. Green bean casserole. So we've got our apples stewing right here now for our apple crisp. We got half of them in there. We're going to get the other half in soon. Mac and cheese, sweet potato casserole, caramelized carrots and onions, Brussels sprouts and bacon. So lots of good stuff. Okay, let's let that stew for just a little bit longer. It's already thickening up a lot, but once it kind of hits that heat a little bit, it will thicken up even more. And then we'll add in some more of our base. But let's get our apples kind of going here. And then we'll be ready to kind of whip up our sweet potato casserole part. And then we can make the kind of candied pecans to go on it, and then our marshmallows, so that will be ready. And then you don't have to bake it until like 25, 30 minutes out from when you are going to be eating, which is nice because you can do a lot of that prep early. And that way you can kind of, be ready for the last moment. So you're not trying to rush through and cook everything at the same time.
Are you hosting dinner for a lot of people?
So I'm hosting dinner for my family plus my stepdad. And then we will be, I'm making half of this food is going to my friends for her Christmas dinner tomorrow. So it's essentially doing like a double portion for them to have tomorrow, which is perfect because a lot of this is great to be baked up beforehand. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to bake all of it up tonight. Like the sweet potato casserole, I'll bake up what we're going to have, but hers will be unbaked for her to pop in the oven beforehand. So it's about 16, 17 people on here. And so a good amount of food, but not too bad. Not as bad as Thanksgiving for us. Thanksgiving, I cook for about 40 people. So that is a lot more food, a lot bigger sizes of everything. But this isn't too bad. Okay, got one more right here. And then it looks like our mushroom gravy is ready, or I should say our cream of mushroom soup is ready for a little bit more of the bouillon. You can see how much it's already thickened up here. And you don't want it too thin when we're doing it, but you want it to be nice and lovely to kind of coat everything up, but knowing that when you bake it, it's also going to thicken up even more. So let's give this a nice break apart those mushrooms. We'll let that thicken. Let me grab a little spoon here. Good. Let's get these in. And then once we got our cream of mushroom gravy, then we can work on our like our onion straws. We're going to fry up our onions to put on the on the green bean casserole. And what I do with my onion straws, so I make them myself. There is no like pre-bought onion straws. And I mix part of them into the base of the casserole, and then the rest goes over the top. So you get this like crispy crunch from the onion straws throughout and then on top, and they are just so good. But they are, I will say, when I make them, these are my son's favorite. I feel like he eats the green bean casserole just to get the onion straws because he really loves them. He also really loves mushrooms, so it's kind of a nice little bit of both on there. Let's get this next set of apples in, and then we can finish off our cream of mushroom soup here. And then I just have 3 more apples after that, and then we're going to be about there. Okay. Have those cooking up nicely. In here we've got brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, vanilla, and lemon juice. And we're using, again, Granny Smith apples, which are nice and tart. Here we go. I think we can add just a little bit more. And we should be at kind of that perfect consistency. There we go. So I'm not going to use the whole 4 cups, but I think we're good right here. It's a nice thick gravy. And again, when we bake it, it will continue to thicken up. So you don't want it quite as thick as your finished product. Otherwise, it will be too thick. Okay. Get that mushroom off. And let's ladle. We're going to ladle it over our 2 things. Let's see. Let me move my flour out of the way, because I won't need this for a hot minute. Okay. We're going to kind of coat it all the way up. So we have a good like bit on every piece of our green beans. And I'll toss it up in just a second, but I want to get part of it over, and then I'm going to put a little bit on our green bean casserole, and then I'll finish off. And this is where all of this like great flavor in the green bean casserole comes from. So good. This is better than any can of cream of mushroom soup. When you can make it fresh, it's not that difficult, but it adds just so much a nicer flavor to your green bean casserole. Okay, let's see. That one looks pretty good. Pour it over.
I can go over everything that's in the green bean casserole.
Yes. So we blanched off our green beans, and then we sauteed up garlic and mushrooms. We added some flour and garlic salt, and then chicken bouillon and starchy water and cream to make the base of our sauce. So it's just a nice kind of really lovely flavor to it. Let me grab some tongs. Actually, I just put my tongs over here that we're using for these. So I'll just coat them up and toss them. And then what we'll finish this off is we'll fry up some onion straws, and then I'll mix part of the onion straws into the base of our casserole, and then the rest go over the top of it. And it just is so delicious. Coat this up. And then we can set these aside for when we're ready for them. Here we go. So kind of making a little bit of room here. And then what you do is once you've got those crispy onion straws on it, you bake it for like 20 minutes at 350 just to kind of meld all of those flavors together and to soften up those green beans just a little bit. But it is definitely one of those things that you can prep ahead and then pop in the oven right before you're about to serve it. Okay, let me rinse out this because I'm going to make my mac and cheese bechamel cheese sauce in here that will pour over the noodles, and then we'll add in more. But I need this big pot for that one again. So we're going to give this a quick rinse. I'll have that fill up, wash out, and then we're going to finish up our apples to kind of cook there. There we go. Let's let that fill up real quick on there. And then we're going to whip up our sweet potatoes real quick. But while that's filling up, so I can give it a quick wash, let's get our last 3 apples in here. And we will finally got all of our apples into it. And then we'll let it cook for a few more minutes, and then we can make the top part for our base.
What's the protein for the dinner?
We have in our oven, we have about 20 pounds of prime rib roast cooking up. We have 1 roast for us and 1 roast for my friends tomorrow. So the nice thing about like a prime rib roast is you cook it all the way through doneness if you're going to do a pre-bake on it. And then the next day, all you have to do is tent it with a little bit of aluminum foil. And then you kind of cook it at a low temperature to warm it all the way up through. But it is such a juicy and delicious piece of meat. You know, it's essentially just like rewarming ham. You know, when you buy your Christmas ham, it's already cooked. That's essentially what you do for the reheating process. And it's one of those meats that actually does remarkably well. Okay. Get this out real quick. On here. Perfect. And now I'll have my big saute pan ready to make my kind of a roux, which will make then a nice creamy cheesy bechamel, which is actually a Mornay sauce, because once we add the cheese to it, it's no longer a bechamel.
How do you season the prime rib?
we minced up garlic, rosemary, sage, and thyme, black pepper and garlic salt, mixed it in oil, rub that all over our roast. So those flavors will infuse into it as it cooks. And then you roast it fat side up so that that fat renders down into the meat, making it extra juicy and delicious. Okay. Let's get these and then I can be done with the apples. Woohoo! Won't take me too long for that. Then we're going to start melting up our butter. We'll whip up our sweet potatoes so that we can lay those base down in our casserole for it, our sweet potato casserole. And we'll get our cheese base. The last kind of things that I'm cooking on tonight's menu are things that you want to kind of cook closer to the dinner time, which are my caramelized carrots and onions, Brussels sprouts and bacon, and mashed potatoes and gravy, because those are, again, something that tastes better if you've cooked them relatively close to eating time. On here we go. We'll get this up. We'll have those cooked. Once they all get about translucent, and I am cooking them very, very low here, then we'll mix in a little bit of cornstarch to thicken it up, and then we'll make our crumb topping using flour, brown sugar, oats, a little bit of baking powder, and stuff. I will say, when I have both my ovens going, because I have my other one set at 350 for when we do pop stuffing, it makes this kitchen a lot more toasty, especially when it's 70 plus degrees outside, because Tennessee decided it was going to have a heat wave on Christmas. And this is where I miss my nice cold Iowa winters. As a kid, we always had a white Christmas. Apparently, my husband went through and it said that 15% of the time in Tennessee, it snows on Christmas. And I can only remember one Christmas that it ever snowed on Christmas here. So I don't know what 15% of the time that counts. Maybe up in the mountains.
Several. Don't you remember the ice storm?
Yes, but that was the only one over Christmas. I don't remember any over Christmas. A couple years ago, we had this terrible ice storm that came through, and it was so cold. It was, I think it was like 15 degrees or lower for about a week straight. And so everything was frozen over. Of course, most of the time they'd be like, oh, nice, you can't go anywhere, except part of our pipes in our house froze. So we had no running in like half of our house, no running water. And it was not the most fun. We're like, kids, you guys can't use this bathroom. You can only use this bathroom. And it was not as fun as in a kid. I never really realized those problems. As an adult, I'm like, oh, winter is not fun for an adult on several reasons. Okay, we've got our last of our apples in here. Woohoo! We'll let these seasoned up and continue cooking. And then we'll get our mashed potato, or not our bechamel for our mac and cheese sauce. Need more butter. Okay, we're going to start for the bechamel. You essentially are going to start out with a roux, which is going to be equal parts flour and butter. I'm going to be using, we're going to make a good amount because I have a lot of mac and cheese here. So we're going to use a cup of butter. So we'll use around a cup of flour. You know what? I don't even know. Let's not. I'll do a cup or 3/4 of a cup because I don't need all of it. Once it's melted, I'm going to turn my burner on low. Then we'll add in our flour, and that will be the base of our roux. And then we'll add in milk to make a nice kind of creamy base. Now, some people like to add in nutmeg or ground mustard seed to their mac and cheese. I do not, so I kind of keep it out of there. But you could definitely add that in there. Let's get our sweet potatoes mashed up here. But let me first kind of clean up a little bit of this mess here so that I have a bit more space. But we cooked our sweet potatoes, we boiled them up in water, and then we we added in a 1/2 cup of butter, and we're going to add in some brown sugar, cinnamon, and kind of just whip them up nicely. Then we'll make a lovely candied, like kind of pecan crust base, and then of course we'll cover it with some mashed potatoes. Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay. Let me grab my hand mixer. Now, because this is a metal pan, not a nonstick coating, I'm going to just whip it right up in my pan. But if you boil them up in a nonstick coating, do not do that because you'll ruin your pan. But that's what is kind of nice about this, because I can do a little bit of this. We'll do a pre-whip. And then we're going to add in cream and brown sugar and cinnamon, but I like to get a little start on it, breaks it up, allows it to kind of soak in a little bit. We had several sweet potatoes in here, but they were all of varying sizes. So I'm going to add about around a cup of brown sugar. So that's a half a cup. I'm not going to pack it. I'm just going to do a loosely class. So it'll be closer to 3/4 of a cup. I don't want my sweet potatoes to be intoxicatingly sweet, but just really a nice kind of sweet deliciousness, because you're going to have the candy pecans and the marshmallows on top. So you don't want them too rich. We're going to add in some cream. Do a little shake of cinnamon, about a teaspoon, and a little pinch of salt. Do a little bit more. Let's whip that base up. Essentially, once we have a really nice creamy base, and you might need to keep adding cream until you get there, then we'll know that we're ready. I think we're actually going to be fairly good, but let's see. Turn it up. That looks about nice. Let me taste it, see if I want to add a bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more cream, but I think everything else is pretty darn good. And we'll whip it nice. There we go. It's getting the nice whipped color that I want. There, nice and smooth. Perfect. Now, I don't like my base to be too runny because I don't want it to be a soupy mess. I like it a little bit thicker. And then we will, and not too sweet, because remember, you're going to be adding marshmallows and candied pecans, or like candy base things. So if you make it too sweet, then it will be way too sweet for it. We're going to scoop this in here. We're going to kind of spread it out. We'll go a little bit. And then I'll add in a little bit more once I see where I need to add it. Again, I don't want to do it super thick either, because I don't want it to be a really thick base. You want a good part nuts to marshmallows to sweet potatoes. Here we go. Beautiful. On here, might actually scrape out a little bit. I forgot I wanted to make some on ours, so let me scrape out a little bit in a small dish for us, because not everybody in my family likes this, but I want to have a little bit. I got my cute little dish. And we'll add a little bit in here as well. And scrape out 4 here. I actually think Jack and Teddy might like this a lot. Some of my kids, they'll be like, oh, sweet potatoes. Even though when they were little, they ate sweet potatoes so much because they loved them. Here we go. So we've got our nice little base here of our sweet potatoes. Okay. And then let's give our apples a little stir. Looks like we can make the bechamel part. We still have to make our candied topping for this, and then we'll put our marshmallows out. But this is getting fairly close to where I want it to be. I've got a couple that need to cook a little bit longer, but we're almost there. Okay, let me grab my whisk. And we're going to add in our flour. Let me grab. Yeah, I got a little piece of sweet potato on me. Let me wash that off. Okay, so we had 3/4 of a cup of butter in here. So we're going to add around 3/4 of a cup of flour, and we'll make into a nice little paste. And this will be the base for our sauce. And keep your heat on low when we mix it in there. We don't want it too high. There we go. And once I have it in there, we'll mix it up. I might add a little bit more because we're pretty close to the consistency that I want. Might be good. I think I'll add just a sprinkle more for it because we're making our roux base. Grab a little bit more flour over here. There. Okay, that should be good. And then you want your roux to cook for just a minute or two to really bring out that richness of flavor, but you don't need to cook it for too long. If you cook it too long, it will go start to turn even a darker brown. But you want to bring out a little bit of this richness. So let it cook for just a few. Here we go. So we'll let that kind of cook up nicely. There we go. Now let me grab a small little pot out so we can melt up some butter for our candied pecans here. I think this should be a good size. And we can get that going and get some butter melting. I've got lots of butter kind of cooking up here. But we're going to need about a stick of butter for this. We'll let that melt up. And beautiful. Let me grab my milk out so we can finish off our little bechamel sauce. We're going to use a little bit of cream too, and then we'll add in shredded cheese. Let's let it cook here. And then let me grab my cheese over so we can actually start shredding that. Now, when you make homemade mac and cheese, I highly recommend you shred your own cheese because it makes for a creamier mac and cheese versus if you buy it pre-shredded that has like an anti-caking agent on it, which kind of prevents it from getting nice and creamy. So I've got a sharp cheddar, and then I've got a aged 3-year sharp cheddar, so a white and a yellow. I like to do a mixture of them. This has a stronger flavor in it, but this is creamier. So they kind of both add flavors and textures to your mac and cheese. So get this up. Now, normally I'm not grating as much for such a large thing, so we've got a good little amount that we need to add in here. But there we go. Grates up pretty fast. We'll do our first part and then we'll grate some more over for our kind of cheesy topping that will go on top. And we've got kind of that. Let's check on our roux here. We're looking fairly good. About a little bit longer to toast it up, and then we'll start adding in our milk and a little bit of garlic salt, because I do love a little garlic salt in my mac and cheese. I think it adds just a great flavor, but you can also just keep it simple with some regular salt. Here, this is a bigger, it's easier to grate when your chunk of cheese isn't so big. But this is, again, grating yourself is going to give you such a creamy and delicious, mac. Okay, this is good enough to start. We can grate some more in a little bit. Now that our bechamel or our roux has kind of toasted up a little bit, we're going to add in our milk to make our base. We're going to add in a little at a time, incorporate it in. It's going to get nice and thick. There we go. Add a little bit more.
Earth Angel just sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Earth Angel. We appreciate that. On here, kind of toasting this up nicely, mixing that in there little by little. Don't just flood it with your milk, or you might add too much in there. I'm gonna turn off my butter over here because it's starting to sizzle, and I know that it's about ready. Got that off. Wrong one. Put that on low again. Okay. And this is going to give us our nice, rich, creamy sauce, kind of the base for our mac and cheese. And then we'll add the cheese in here. So here's our bechamel, and then when we add the cheese, it technically is a Mornay sauce. Little by little, whisk it up, mix it in until it's nice and smooth, and then add some more in there. And then we'll add in some cheese. And then I add cheese into the sauce, but then I also add grated cheese back into the thing. So you have just so much cheese. And then, of course, the cheese topping. Okay. Let me turn up my heat just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to need probably up to 6 cups of milk for this, because it will thicken once it heats up, it thickens more, and then you add more in. But you can't just put it all in at one time, or you won't get it just won't come together. There we go. We've got ours. And this is why I'm using my big saute pan for this, because it does make it a little bit easier when you have a bigger surface area. Okay, we're going to let that simmer for just a second. No. Woo. Almost lost my whisk in there. Okay. While we wait, let me slide this over here, and we can work on our candied pecans. I've got my apples base here almost done, so we're going to be ready to add our cornstarch and then make our topping on that. So that's just about ready for it. Okay, let me grab, we've got our things. I made a nice little bowl to mix this up in. Okay. Whew. Let's see, I've seen some little bubbles here, so I'm going to go into our sauce. As you can see, it's thickened up again, so we'll add some more milk in here.
For those just joining, can you go over everything you're doing?
Yes, so in the oven right now, we have our rib roast roasting up, and then we've got part of our green bean casserole done. We've got to do our crispy fried onions on there. We've got part of our sweet potato casserole done. We're just going to do the candied pecans and the marshmallows on it. We are making bechamels. Well, we're making our base for our mac and cheese here. We've got our apples cooking for our apple crisp. And then we still have caramelized carrots and onions, bacon and Brussels sprouts, and mashed potatoes left for it. But we might take a little break because those are stuff we're going to do a little bit kind of closer or kind of finish up on there. So let's get this part finished here. And okay, get this mixed up, and then we're going to do our candy pecans for it. Okay. Get this. Add a little bit more in for this next part.
And is this for tonight?
This is for part of it. It's going to be our Christmas Eve dinner for us, and then I'm actually making half of this for my friends for their Christmas dinner tomorrow. So they'll get half. I've got everything in the foil is going to them, and then we'll have ours that are going to be in all of our little Dutch ovens here. Okay, let's get our candied pecans here. We need about 2 cups of chopped pecans, which is roughly this whole bag. A little bit less, but we're just gonna add it in there. I'm gonna coat them with our butter. This is our stick of butter that's nice and hot. And then we're gonna add in 2/3 cup of brown sugar. And again, this is gonna add another sweetness level to our base here. So we need about 2/3 of a cup. So I'm just going to, this is a little less than a half, so I'm just gonna do 2 slightly less than a half to get us to where we want. We're gonna add a little bit of salt and flour. We need about 1/4 cup of flour. Not very much, but it kind of makes a nice little coating on it. So over here, and then we're gonna add in a little bit of salt, just about 1/2 teaspoon. There we go. We're gonna coat these up and then we'll sprinkle these over our sweet potato casseroles. Just let me grab a little spoon to toss them. And let's take a quick pause because I gotta get my sauce here. There we go. We should be just about ready. You can see how it's thickening up so nicely. There we go. Add a little bit more. Then we should be close to thing. But I'm gonna now switch to add an extra bit of richness to it, which I think makes it kind of delicious for mac and cheese. We're gonna switch and add a little bit of heavy cream. It makes it a slightly creamier mac and cheese, so it's not all, you know, whole milk base, but you don't have to use as much. A little bit goes a long way to giving you that really rich, creamy base. Okay, I'm gonna turn the heat off of this, and we're gonna put in a bit of our cheese now with that heat off, and it's going to melt. And then we'll grate more cheese, but this will be kind of our base. I've got a good amount going in here. But make sure you turn off and just let the natural heat melt it, because you don't want to scald your cheese on the bottom of your pan. Here we go. We're going to let that melt here, kind of cool off. I'll stir it in a second. Let me get a sip. Let's get these tossed. And these are kind of our candied pecans for our green bean, or not a green bean, our sweet potato casserole. And coat them up in that brown sugar and butter and that little bit of flour, which just allows that coating to stick on a little bit nicer. And this adds a great texture to the sweet potato casserole, but a nice bit of flavor as well. Okay. And there. We're going to pour half of this over our sweet potato casserole. Or more of it over, because I've got more going here. That one's for ours. Kind of coat it up. Spread it out nicely so you get a little bit of it in every bite. There we go. And then we'll do the same over here. And while this is a side dish, it kind of tastes more like a dessert to me, but it's delicious. There we go. Coat that up. Put the rest of this over here. And then all we have to do is put our marshmallows on it. So we've got that part done. It's nice to get some of these things. We'll do our marshmallows here in a little bit. Let's get our cheese sauce here. You can see that cheese is starting to really melt into it for our things. And then we'll add our marshmallows on our thing. We'll have that base done.
You have a question. For Are those sweet potatoes with pecans?
Yes. So that is kind of mashed up sweet potatoes with butter, cream, brown sugar, a little bit of cinnamon for it. Just a really nice, lovely base for it. Let's add a little bit of garlic salt in there. You don't need a whole lot of salt because remember the cheese is going to add a bit of saltiness to this, but you want a little bit to help it. And then I'll get a spoon and I'm going to taste it to see if I need to add anything else. We will be adding in more cheese. This is just the base part that we can kind of coat up our noodles with. And then we'll add more shredded cheese in and then we'll top it with cheese. A little sprinkle more of our garlic salt, and then I think we should be good with this base part. It's a lot of sauce, so I want to make sure I have it seasoned well. Okay. Now, let's bring this a little bit closer here. I'm done with this whisk. And we're going to pour this a good amount over this base. I'm going to get some in here, and then I'll go back over because I want to just make sure I get enough in both bases. Here we go. Beautiful. And then let me grab a spatula here. You're going to kind of coat those noodles up with this base of this sauce. And then we'll add in our cheese. And then we'll add a nice thick layer of cheese on there. You just can see how delicious. Make sure you coat every noodle up because you don't want any dry noodles. Beautiful. And then got mine over here. We're going to coat this up. And then we'll grate cheese over, mix it in, and then we'll grate our topping of it. So, and this gives you that good gooey cheese pull inside it instead of it just being in the sauce on there.
And why are some of the dishes in tins?
So we are making up, the ones that are in the Dutch ovens are for our dinner tonight, and the ones in their tins are for my friend's dinner tomorrow night. So I normally don't cook up a lot of food for like friends or special occasions on it, but she lost her partner about a month and a half ago, and this is her first Christmas. So I'm making her up so she can have a wonderful kind of Christmas dinner with her family and not have to worry about anything. So we're going to grate up in here. And again, hand grate your cheese. It will give you a creamier mac and cheese than the pre-grated because the pre-grating has like an anti-caking agent on it. So we've got that. Where's my second bar of cheddar? Now the cheddar cheese, this sharp cheddar gives you more of the cheddar flavor. The orange cheddar right here is just a little bit creamier, a little bit smoother, so give you more of that nice creamy cheese pull to it. Okay. We'll mix this base into our thing. And then we'll do a kind of a cheese coating. And then the last thing you do is you just take some breadcrumbs. We'll melt some butter and we'll toast up some breadcrumbs and sprinkle it over the top. Yeah. Beautiful. And then when that melts, when you bake this up, all of that shredded cheese that we have in there will melt over it and make it just so creamy and delicious. Okay, let's finish up this one. But while we wait, let's get our butter melting for our panko breadcrumbs to toss in it on there. And then I think we'll take a little bit of a break or whatnot, or we might just kind of finish up because we have a little bit of waiting time before we kind of do the last part. So, but we will definitely do a short of all of the finished stuff on there. But we kind of have a waiting period while the roast kind of finishes cooking and before we kind of do a little prep of it. Okay, so we're making our nice kind of cheesy layer over the top. I've got our butter melting for our panko breadcrumbs. And what we'll do is we'll coat the panko breadcrumbs in the butter with a little bit of garlic salt, and we'll sprinkle them over the top. It gives you a nice little crunchy layer, but you want to make sure you have lots of cheese on this top layer. We're going to be grating both of our cheeses again because it's a double cheddar mac. Here. And whew, looking good. Beautiful. Kind of spread it out. And you don't need to go super thick because, again, it will melt over and go through just beautifully. Let me wash my hands on here. While we're waiting for the butter to melt, we can take our marshmallows and we can lay these over the top of our sweet potato casserole. Now, you can use mini marshmallows or full-size ones. If you use the full-size ones, cut them in half. That way they go through, spread out a little bit farther, and you're not getting quite as much marshmallow. So I just kind of cut them like this and then fold them out. But either one works. The store was all out of mini marshmallows. I'm guessing lots of people are having sweet potato casserole. And so all they had were big marshmallows. So we'll get these nice and kind of covered up over on there. It gives you that nice things. Now, just know that it's fine if there's little gaps between it because marshmallows expand when you bake. So they don't need to be piled mile high because then they'll poof up too much. And you don't want too much marshmallow per thing because then I think it overpowers it. Okay. Let's get this going. All right, sounds like our butter is ready. So I'm going to remove it from the heat. And then what you're going to do is we're going to pour our panko breadcrumbs in here. We're going to coat them up. So I need about a cup or so in here. A little bit of garlic salt. These are seasoned. Seasoned tastes better than plain. You could add in a little bit of mustard seed if you wanted to. Mix them so they're coated with the butter. That allows them that when they bake up in the oven, they get golden brown and crispy. And so instead of being a dry crunch, they're a nice crispy crunch, like a crouton crunch on there. And then you're going to sprinkle this over the top. So we'll have this on there, and then we'll save the rest for our other one. Here we go. Beautiful. And so now this, I'll cover it up in aluminum foil, but then tomorrow when they want to heat this up, they just have to bake it for about 20 to 30 minutes until it's bubbling and golden for it. Okay. Well, we kind of have a nice little pause here. So we might come back in a little bit, or we'll just have a clip depending on how crazy it gets around here. But because we have a little roasting and it's literally just kind of a boring me cutting marshmallows up, we'll come back in a little bit. But thank you guys so much for joining us for our Christmas cook-along feast here. And there, I hope you guys are enjoying your Christmas Eve. But guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks again for joining us here. Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. This is part 2 of our Christmas feast prep thing. Earlier today, we prepped up some of our food earlier. We prepped up, this is our green bean casserole. It's almost finished. Our apple crisp, which will be ready to bake up. Our sweet potato casserole that we'll bake up, and then our mac and cheese. Now this setup here is for my friends that they're going to pick up and they'll have tomorrow, but we have ours over there waiting to go into the oven to bake up for the final part. We've got our prime rib roast in the oven finishing off. We'll be taking those out in a few minutes. We've got some potatoes boiling for our mashed potatoes. And then we are going to be cooking up our caramelized carrots and onions and our Brussels sprouts and bacon. So let's get our Brussels sprouts and bacon going for that, because we want the bacon to crisp up. I do have my onion straws, my second batch or third batch actually, finishing up on here, which we will be putting in our green bean casserole, because when I make my green bean casserole, I make everything from scratch. Nothing is pre-made. That's the same homemade cream of mushroom soup, and my husband stole an onion straw that I literally just took out of the grease, out of the oil, and it is very, very hot. That's what he gets for stealing them. The first batch had already cooled, but I had put them in our casserole over there. Okay, we've got our bacon right here. I'm going to snip it up, and then we're going to crisp it up, and where they'll cook our Brussels sprouts in the bacon grease with the crispy little bits of bacon. So I'm just going to use my kitchen shears, snip it up, and let it start to kind of crisp up. And then we can throw in our Brussels sprout that I have kind of chopped up, kind of quartered, so that they all crisp up nicely for it. We've got our sourdough bread that is about to come out of the oven, and then I can turn my oven down to 350 degrees to bake up the rest of everything else. So we're kind of on the final stretch. Oh, and I'll be making a quick little gravy to go with the mashed potatoes, because my daughter firmly believes that mashed potatoes have to be served with gravy. They can't be by themselves. Must have gravy. So we'll have that. We'll take our roast out here in just a second, let it kind of sit. I have it sitting in the oven right now with the oven off, but that residual heat, keeping it nice and warm. But then we will take it out to let it sit to cool. And we have two big rib roasts, prime rib roasts. Again, one's for us tonight and one's for my friend. Again, the nice thing about the rib roast is it actually reheats really, really well. You just kind of reheat it at like 200 degrees on your oven until it's fully warm, just like you do with ham. And it stays really moist and tender, doesn't get overcooked. So it's one of those ones that it does work really well. Okay, I feel like I've been snipping this bacon forever. But we are down. Do a couple random snips now. We'll go wash my hands. We can get that going. Okay. And I'm going to turn this on to start heating over, like 5 or 6, kind of get it to cook up. I'll do it a little higher, and then we'll turn it down on there. Let's see if our onions need flipping yet. I have them cooking up here. This is our third batch here. So not quite, you know what? We're pretty good here. So let's flip a couple more. Look at that. I always say the first batch turns out the absolute best, because a little bit of the dredging gets collected in there, but these are all crisping up very nicely. Here. And then this is what we have on our pan is actually the second batch, because the first batch I already have in the green bean casserole that we're going to be eating tonight. And this is, you know how like typical green bean casserole has those like French's onion straws on it. Well, I like to make mine homemade, and then we use fresh green beans, and I make a homemade cream of mushroom soup, which we did on our earlier stream.
And what did you bread them in?
So this is a mixture of, so first you make a dredge, which is flour, and then I seasoned it with Italian seasoning, onion powder, and garlic, salt, black pepper. And then you kind of coat them up, and then I cracked some eggs over it, mixed that all in there, and then I took the second half of the dredge, added about a cup of seasoned panko breadcrumbs, and then put those in there. And that gives them that nice extra crunch to them. There we go. We've got our beautiful sourdough here. Baking up, we'll transfer that out. And then I've got to turn my oven down to a 350. But I'm going to, there we go. Hope the door open a little bit, let some of that heat out, because the oven always need to bring it down so it's hotter, but I want it to cool off a little. There we go. So 350, because we're going to pop those in here in just a second. But let's get our sourdough on a cutting board and resting on there.
Do you have to cook the green beans before you would add them to the casserole?
So you want to blanch them. So it's not a full cooking. You pop them in boiling water for a few minutes until they're very vibrant and green. And then you will take them out. And then I have made them cream of mushroom soup and everything for it. Let me get my oven mitt back on. There we go. I tried to do kind of like a Christmas tree, like one of those little arboreta tree design, but it looked too much like a feather. But I tried to do it. It's a little bit harder on the round ones. It's easier to make a Christmas tree. This is like one of those long, tall trees, an arboreta on there. Close. Okay. Let's get some tongs out here for my bacon. Kind of spread it apart. Now that it's kind of heating up, once that kind of crisps up, I'm going to check my potatoes here and see if they're soft and ready for it. But let's see. I think we got all of them flipped over. Yep. It's kind of hard to see when you get to the couple second, third batches. You have a little bit more of this kind of foamy because you have less oil and more flour in it. So it's a little bit harder to see your bake on it, but we're pretty good there. So what we can do with this first batch here while we're waiting is I've got my green bean casserole with my cream of mushroom soup. I'm going to give it a quick toss. You can see that homemade cream of mushroom soup full of sauteed mushrooms as well. Toss it up. And then what I like to do is I add some of my green bean or my crispy onions into the base of my green bean casserole, and then the rest go on top. But it adds a nice texture and crunch for when it goes in. So making sure I get all these little crispy straws to go in there as well. And then the rest will go over the top. But I'm going to mix this in, and it just adds so much flavor and texture. I feel it just makes it so nice, so it's not mushy. I like also, again, the fresh green beans add, again, great texture to it. And I feel like once you've had green bean casserole this way, it's going to be really hard to go back to, like, I want to say it's like the retro version, the one that's been made since like the 1950s. We'll start sprinkling some of these onion straws over. And that way when we take the second out, we'll let them kind of cool and soak up a little bit of their oil on there. Okay, let's check our potatoes. I'm going to get a nice spoon, kind of find a big one and press it through. And if my fork goes through it, then I'm going to know that we're ready for mashing. Ooh, looks like we're just about perfect. So I'm going to turn this off. I've got about 5 to 6 big russet potatoes in here, peeled, cubed, and then because today is a special day, I rinsed my water twice with the potatoes in it so that it gets rid of as much of that potato starch, which is going to leave you the fluffiest mashed potatoes. So let me strain these, and then we can start to put our rest of our casseroles in the oven now that it's been a minute for the oven to kind of cool down a little. Okay. Give it a good shaky shake. Pop those back on there. And then I'm going to take my butter and we're going to stick it. Let me make sure my back burner's off. Yep. We're going to stick our butter into the base of this, let it melt. And I'm going to do, since I have a bit more than I normally do, I'm going to add a little bit more butter. There we go. We're going to let it melt completely before we whip it up. Let me wash my hands here. We also need to give a little drizzle of cream in there. If you wait until your butter is melted and your cream is warmed up, it gives you a fluffier mashed potato than to whip it when it's cold. So a good mix around. We'll let it warm up. Let's check my onion straws here, and then we can, yep, perfect. There we go. And you can see By the end, you get a little bit more crispy bits. If you have to do any more than 3 rounds, then you're going to need to completely change your oil out. I'll turn off my burner here. But we're going to put them on our paper towel, let it absorb up the rest of this kind of oil, and then we'll put them on top of our green bean casserole. And as they cool, they will crisp up and get that nice crunch. And this is a nice thing because I'm gonna bake up ours tonight, but tomorrow all they have to do is bake their casserole at 350 for about 20 minutes, enough to heat up everything inside and cook those green beans a little bit more. And it will be just as good as if you had it today. It actually holds together really well. Okay. Here, I think we've got this all in there. Okay, let me give our bacon a little stir, and then we are going to go and pop everything in the oven over here so that those will be all ready to bake up and have with our dinner here because we're on the home stretch. Okay, let me grab actually I don't even need oven mitts for these because they're not too hot. Have our oven nice at 350. So here is our mac and cheese. We're going to bring our mac and cheese in. This is with 2 types of cheddar cheese. We made a Mornay sauce, tossed the noodles in, and then added shredded cheese and breadcrumbs tossed in. Here is our green bean casserole going in. That's with our fried onion straws on it. And last but definitely not least, we have a sweet potato casserole with some candied pecans on it and some marshmallows. I like to do mine a little bit lighter on the marshmallows so it's not so sweet. But the one that I'm making for my friend is completely covered on it, so it's there. I'm going to put this in here, and we'll do it for about 20 minutes. And all of that should be just about ready. Tonight after dinner, we're going to have our gingerbread, our tomte cake decorating one. So instead of a gingerbread house, we have a tomte cake. One of these has the tomte in it. I happen to know because we had 6, but sweet little Jackie came up while I was working on the puzzle. And I think, my husband was in the other room. And all of a sudden, we turn around and there's him sitting on the couch with one whole tomte house in his hand, eating it, and he happened to have the one tomte house with the tomte in it. And so I quickly took it and I hid it in the bottom of one. We luckily still have 5 houses, 1 for each kid. So they're all we have our decorating contests, and then, my family votes on it, and then the winner wins a prize. We were thinking whoever won might get to open up a present early. So that's a big, exciting point for it. Okay, we're going to use this pan to cook up our things. So I'm just going to clean out a little bit of this oil and bits for it. So I just take my paper towel in there and kind of do it this way. Soak up the remaining grease and bits, and then I can kind of pour it to the side. But I only have so many big pans, and I don't want to go smaller on it. There we go. So we've got our nice hot grease. And I'll get rid of this. But this is a really easy way to clean up your thing. And then you just need a quick rinse out. And then I'll wipe it down one more time, and then I'll have a nice clean pan to use for my carrots. Less dishes, and that's always a win. Okay. Let's get our onions cooking up for our caramelized carrots and onions. Let me grab my oil out. Now with this, I use a mixture of oil and butter, but I start my onions off in oil because I can cook them at a little higher temperature. And then it just kind of allows them to caramelize up a little bit nicer. And then when I add my butter in towards the end to make the nice kind of brown sugar glaze sauce for them. So let's top these in. good amount of onions because I love lots of onions with my caramelized onions and carrots. It just makes them taste so much better. We'll break this apart, kind of coat them up. Here. Down with that part. Let's get our bacon over here, kind of flip it over. Once it gets to a kind of a semi-crisp, I don't like it to be too firm or crunchy because it gets harder and harder the longer you cook it with the Brussels sprouts. But a chewy crispness, then I'll throw in the Brussels sprout leaves. But make sure you cook it there till it's rendered down most of its fat and it's kind of got that nice mix between a crispy and a chewy. If you go all the way crispy, by the time you're done cooking the restaurants, then they'll be hard bits. So don't overcook them. Let's get our onions. And then I think I'm ready to put the rest of these on the top of my casserole now that it's had a chance to soak up some of that extra oil. And this is, again, where it's at. I've been told... Time to retire that spatula. I used it a lot today. You know how many utensils I go through in this house? I told you I'm a little rough on my utensils here. I've been told and instructed by the cameraman that we must reserve a small bowl as the cameraman tax since there's no cheese to be had, at least this round. So I'll get these going. I think that should suffice. He does know that we have he's like a little more here. One tasty morsel left for you. And then we'll put the rest over the top, including all of these little crumbs because those just add an extra little crunch and they are just so delicious. And beautiful. We'll add this to our next kind of grouping of our finished, semi-finished products that all you have to do is bake for 20 to 30 minutes and you're done. We can be rid of this and another spot cleared. It's always nice when you get down to the final and it's less and less dishes, but there's our green bean casserole. This is our apple crisp with 13 apples in it, a nice crisp topping. Our sweet potato casserole with candied pecans, and then our 2-cheese mac and cheese with a nice kind of panko breadcrumb on top. And then, of course, our sourdough that we'll be eating up tonight.
You have a question? Do you cook for your friend every Christmas?
I do not. You know, she lost her partner about a month and a half ago. And so I'm kind of, you know, making it a little bit easier for her for the holidays. But the funny thing is I had a different friend last year that I ended up cooking Christmas and Eve and Christmas dinner for because she had surgery like 3 days before and she couldn't move. And so I cooked up the whole little feast for them so that they would have a really nice Christmas dinner and Christmas thing on there. But normally I do not. But it's just kind of, you know, when people are in need, I like to try to get out and help them. Okay, we've got our wonderful, smells so good. Onions caramelizing. Got my bacon here. Since we're kind of on the last 20 or so minutes here, let's get our meat out of the oven so it can sit and rest so that you don't want to cut into your roast when it's hot because if you do, all of the juices fall out. So I got to find where I put my oven mitts. They're around here somewhere. Here they are. You'd be surprised. I have so many pairs because when I'm cooking, they're in all sorts of random spots. Okay. Here are our prime rib roasts. They've been cooking for about 2.5, 3 hours now. We seared them off in the beginning at 450 after we coated them up with garlic, sage, rosemary, and thyme, garlic, salt, black pepper, and a little oil base to them on here. But one is a 10-pound roast and one is a 9-pound prime rib roast. on here. We'll let them sit in there, but what the nice thing about these roasts is if you have people who like meat cooked at different temperatures, the outside ones are your more like medium or well done, and then you get to the middle, and your middle is more of your medium rare or the big chunk, which is what we really love in here. But don't cut into it right away. Let it sit at room temperature and for 10 to 20 minutes before you're ready to serve. It's going to stay nice and hot for a long time. And then if you are going to pre-bake a roast like we did for our friends, let it come completely to room temperature, pack it up, and then when you reheat it the next day, tent it with a little bit of aluminum foil, pop it in your oven at 200 for about like 1 to 2 hours to really bring it up to it. Or you can slice it, pre-slice it, put it out on a tray, and then heat it up at 350 for about 20 minutes. So you have two options if you want the pretty carving option or the other one.
Question, how long at 450?
450 for 30 minutes, and then you're going to drop it down to either 350 or 325, depending how long you want it to cook. 325 buys you an extra like 30 minutes. 350, saves you a little time. And it's based on kind of your how much meat you have. So it's about 10 minutes per pound after that initial sear off, give or take. But again, always use your thermometer to check the internal temperature so that you have it at whatever setting you want it cooked at. We love a nice medium rare here, so that's kind of what our love best is. And then when you roast it, make sure when you do this, you roast it with the fat side up so that as it cooks, the fat renders down into the meat, making it very succulent and tender and delicious. Okay, let's add our carrots in. So I've got rainbow carrots that I kind of quartered up. We're going to add these into our onions that are kind of nice and got a good caramelization on it. Give them a nice toss up. Man overboard. And then we're going to put our lid on here to let it steam cook for a few minutes. That's going to make them tender. And then we'll add in some butter and brown sugar and a little bit of garlic salt for that final kind of touching up on it. Okay. And now I don't like to have all of my grease in here when I throw in these Brussels sprouts. So just take your bacon, kind of push it over to the side, and then just kind of like we did the cleanup with the like the oil from the onions, we're going to use this. But let me first get my lid on there so that can start steam cooking. There we go. Slide this on. Make sure I have it all down there. And then we're going to tint this for, just like we did with our onion straws, it just kind of coats it up and you get a little bit less in there. There we go. Now this is going to be hot, but we can take a good amount of this grease out. You don't have to pour it, in another bowl. You can just suck it up with a paper towel. And just because you don't want to have all of it in there when you cook up, otherwise it's going to make for really greasy Brussels sprouts. There we go. And then we're going to whip up our mashed potatoes, but I like to leave them sitting like this until they're warm. Once you whip them, they'll cool down faster, but if you keep them in this base thing, it keeps them nice and warm. Okay, looks like we've got a good amount of this oil out. Or I should not say oil, bacon grease, but that's what makes it taste so good. And then we've got our bacon at this mix between a crispy and a chewy. That's like the happy one, because if you do too crispy, your bacon will be like rock hard by the time your Brussels sprouts. And you can hear them sizzling as we pop them in there. Just make sure you stir around and coat up each little Brussels sprout with that remaining bacon grease. Beautiful. We'll coat this around. Perfect. And we'll mix it here. I realize I meant to save some of that warm, starchy water for our gravy, but I'm just going to turn my sink on and let it heat up, and we'll use that to make the base of our gravy. Same difference, except that water was already hot. Okay. Now that we have them coated, just spread them out And we'll let them kind of sizzle things. But as you see, I kind of cut them into, woo, they're jumping now. I'm going to turn my temperature down to about a 4 on there. It smells so good. So good. Okay, let's do our first whip up on our mashed potatoes. Slide this over here. This is going to be for gravy in just a second. This is where I need more space. Okay. Let's get our whisks in.
Have you ever requested, can you show them a pumpkin cake and just go over the tradition of it?
Yes, I can. Let me see if we're close to this. Okay, perfect. Let me fill this up and then I can turn that off. For it, I'll grab a pumpkin cake. It comes in these little, you make 2 per batch, like they're 2 little houses. I'll grab them. But it is they're so much easier to decorate than gingerbread houses. So this is our tomte cake. It is kind of just like a mild gingerbread spice cake on here. You have these cute little ridges around it, which is really great for piping in the frosting. The kids can stick all of their candy on there. I'll make a buttercream, like a rich buttercream frosting to go on here. But the kids can decorate it, but they don't have to worry about their gingerbread or like house falling apart. So at the end, it looks just like a gingerbread house, just a little bit easier. And then one of these cakes has a little metal tomte in it. He's about this big. And when they go to open up, because these taste actually really good, they're better than like a gingerbread cookie house. Nobody eats those anyways. But inside is a little metal tomte, and whoever gets it gets good luck for the year, because tomtens typically are the ones who watch out for you. They like little people who live in your walls in Sweden that take care of your, turn off the light when you've forgotten it, shut the door, all of those little things to kind of take around. And so you have them, and whoever gets it gives you extra good luck for it. Now, I don't know if I count little Jackie as already getting it this year, because he stole a tomte cake after it, and I still can't believe it. He just reached up there and grabbed the whole tomte cake off the counter and was happy as can be, sitting on the couch, just eating away, and he happened to find the one that had the tomte, so I took the tomte out and I put it in the bottom of another one so the kids, won't notice. Hopefully they'll still have a chance to find it. But you pop it in there during the baking process, and it does pop out so nicely. Okay, we've got that flipped here. Let's get this whipped up. Let me grab a little trivet to put under this. And I'll sprinkle a little salt in, and then we'll test it. I'll probably add in some more cream, but I just like to start with a little bit first, because you never quite know how starchy your potatoes are and how much liquid you're going to need. There we go. So we're going to break them around, and then I'm going to add in some more cream, because they still need a little bit more love. But we're almost to that perfect good whip. So you can see how hot they still are, steaming off, which is why you wait till the end to kind of do it. We're going to add in our cream. We're going to let it heat up, warm up in that potato mixture until it's nice and hot, and then we'll be ready to pop it in there. Okay, let's get our gravy going. I've got to try to figure out, there we go, this. Trying to make sure I can get them cooking all at the same time. That's a problem with small, it's not a small, it's a regular size, but not as big. Let's get our butter melting we're going to make a roux base for our gravy. So do about 2 to 3 tablespoons. I'm going to turn on my back burner, kind of let it melt up just a little bit. Let's get this. That's my front burner. There. Okay, that should be good. Okay, here we've got our prime rib roast. They're resting now on there. I'm going to try to get a little bit of that flavor stuff out to add into the base of our gravy as well. Not too much because it has a bit of flavor, it can be a bit intense if we're using it.
Two-part question. How much butter do you go through in a typical week? What about this week?
Oh, okay. In a typical week, I would say we go through, we don't need all of this liquid, like 3 pounds of butter, I would say. Not quite a 4-pack from Costco, but close. And that just depends on if I did a good, my regular amount of baking in there. This week I have gone through, you don't want to know, it's so bad, like 10 to 15 pounds of butter. I have gone through, that's 10 to 15 pounds of butter. I mean, just the other day we made cookies and I used 2 pounds of butter on stream for that. So a good amount, but I don't normally do all of this baking on there, but a good amount. Okay, let's mix in our beef bouillon here. I'm going to use up the rest of this into it. This is going to help make the base for our gravy. I'm going to dissolve a little bit. Let's give this a good toss. Perfect. You see they're kind of toasting up. This is what I want on there, the little leaves, to get a nice little toasting in there. Crisp them up, adds a great flavor. Beautiful. We've got our carrots here. They're getting nice and tender. You can see as I move them, they're a lot more flexible, which means they're getting to that nice, tender, crisp stage where they still have a good firmness to them, but they're tender all the way through. And that's what I like them. I don't want them mushy. I don't want them hard. That tender, crisp is the perfect way. Once they get there, then we'll add a pat of butter in here, some brown sugar, and a little bit of garlic salt. To the base, let's go check everything in our oven and see how that's looking. See if it's ready to come out. And if it is, then we'll get some trivets over here and going. Sometimes it needs a little bit more on here, but I think we are pretty close to coming out. I'm going to drop this guy down underneath, give him a little less direct heat. We've got our marshmallow, or our mac and cheese, and everything is just about ready. I'm going to give it 5 more minutes. I want it to be a little bit crisper. Let's do 5 minutes, and hopefully I'll have everything else done right around that time, and then we'll be able to kind of go through everything. Let's do a quick whip of our mashed potatoes on here. There we go. Now they're getting nice and light and fluffy. Beautiful. Perfect. Those are perfect. Okay. Let's get our roux going for our gravy. So I need a little bit of flour. So we had about 2 to 3 tablespoons of flour in there, or butter in there. So we're going to do about the same with flour, kind of equal parts. Make a nice kind of paste, and then we'll add in our little bouillon, our beef bouillon, and water, and then a little bit of my secret ingredient, which is kitchen bouquet, which gives it a nice color and a little bit of a roasted flavor to it. Let's mix this up. There we go. We're gonna let it heat and kind of cook for just a little bit to add a little bit of richness to this.
What's the green in the pan?
This is Brussels sprouts that we've kind of chopped up, so they get a little bit nicer. They're less bitter when you chop them up and can cook them. So we'll have that with our bacon, which again complements the Brussels sprouts so nicely. We're cooking them up in some of that residual bacon grease.
Bacon complements everything.
Yes, it really does. So we've got our good bacon here. We've got our caramelized. Well, right now we've got our carrots and onions sauteing, but we're going to add in some brown sugar and butter here to make a nice little slightly sweetened sauce. I don't add too much because I like it very mildly sweet. But I think we're done with that lid. It's gotten to the carrots to the perfect point. So I'm going to slide this over here. We're going to add a little pat of butter into the middle of this. That way when it mixes with that brown sugar, it adds just a nice bit of flavor. There we go. Now I'm going to go grab my brown sugar because I guess I put it away. And I need just a splash of it. I'm going to turn this down. I guess it is at a 4. And we want kind of just about a tablespoon or so of brown sugar. Not a lot, but just a little bit to enhance the natural sweetness in the onions and the carrots.
Do you use salted butter?
Yes, always salted butter in this house. I always feel like when you have unsalted butter, something's missing. Okay, we've got this. Here we're going to add in our mixture of our beef bouillon and a little bit of our water. I'm just going to give it a good stir. Little by little, add it in. You don't want to just flood it up because you want it to thicken up fairly nicely. And then make sure I get all of that little bouillon bits in there. Mix that here. I'm going to turn this down nice and low. We'll add our little bit of garlic salt to this and a little bit of garlic salt to our carrots because those together make a really, really lovely flavor. The garlic salt just enhances the sweetness of this, but it doesn't make it too salty or sweet. Okay. And add a little bit more. And then the way to give yourself a really rich color to your gravy without having to use a ton of like additional bouillon, Kitchen Bouquet. It's like a browning sauce. It's like roasted veggies. A small bit is going to give you the nice, beautiful, rich color that you want with that roasted flavor in there, which is just lovely. And then we're going to stir up our carrots and onions here. I'm going to actually get a second one so I don't transfer anything. Beautiful. Beautiful. And we have a rainbow carrots in here, so we have a mixture of yellow, white, purple. And it's kind of perfect timing because we're about ready to grab our stuff out of the oven too. Okay. Let me turn this back burner down nice and low so that when we come back, I'll be ready to add a little bit more in that base for it, for our gravy. Let's go grab the rest of their stuff out of the oven. Beautiful. Okay, let's start. I'm gonna have to make a couple trips with this. We've got our sweet potato casserole with our candied pecans. Pop it right over here. We're running out of space fairly quickly. Or we'll slide this over and then get another little trivet for our next one. Which is our green bean casserole with our homemade mushroom gravy. And then I'm going to get one more trivet here to use on our last one. Which is our homemade mac and cheese with 2 types of cheddar cheese, a sharp white cheddar and a sharp orange cheddar. Adds just great flavor to it. And let's get our last little bit of here. And this is essentially our feast. Now, we'll set the table and we'll clean it up nicely. But as you can see, we are going to be eating well tonight. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. So this is our Christmas feast. You want part 1 and 2, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. So it has like my knives, my cutting boards, my roasters, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.